Keek on the mic, keek on the mic. Keek on the mic, keek on the mic. People, this the intro. Sacramento, California, born and raised. And Antelope is where I spend most of my days. Talk bad about my team, you must be a clown. This is Keek on the mic, so you know you better bear down. Bear down.
Hey, what's going on, Bears fans? Thank you so much for joining me for another episode of Keek on the Mic, the podcast all about the Chicago Bears. Like always, if you're new to the channel, make sure you hit that subscribe button and the bell notification to catch all Bears content right here on the podcast. So, Bears fans, as you can see, I am officially back and I am ready to go and produce a lot of great Bears content. Before I go any further with today's episode of Keek on the Mic, I just want to thank you guys so much for everyone that reached out to me and just wished me luck, gave my wife and I well wishes for our new beautiful baby girl. She is perfect in every sense of the word. She is just a little chunk and a little ray of sunshine. And she's just truly a breath of fresh air. And I can honestly say that if you are a parent, which a lot of you guys have reached out to me and said, yes, I have 3 kids or 6 kids or whatever. It was the most beautifulest moment of my life. And that's all I can say. There were so many emotions that went into watching my daughter be born. But it's great to be back. But once again, thank you guys so much for all the continued support of the podcast and all the well wishes you gave my wife and I as we welcomed our beautiful baby girl into this world. And even though I was gone, even though I was not recording podcasts, I was still listening and watching to all Bears news and watching all the Bears preseason games, including the final preseason game against the Cleveland Browns. And with that being said, the preseason is finally over, and the Chicago Bears finished 3-0 for the first time since 1994. And a cool fact about that is the last time the Bears finished 3-0 in the preseason, back in 1994, they also made the playoffs in the same year. So pretty cool fact there. And the one thing I can say about the preseason, as it wraps up and as we prepare for week 1 against the San Francisco 49ers, is that under Matt Eberflus, each week the team got better. And obviously, we didn't see the starters in an extended amount of fashion until that final week 3 preseason game against the Cleveland Browns, where they got to play a half. But even the backups played really well. You can definitely tell that this whole Chicago Bears football team is buying in to the new culture that Matt Eberflus brought to Chicago. And you could tell that every single player gave their all and their maximum effort on every single play. And that is definitely kudos to Matt Eberflus. And like I said, even though we didn't get to see the starters, right, on an extended basis until that final preseason game, it was still nice to see the amount of effort that even the backups were giving for the Chicago Bears football team. And that's even kudos to Ryan Poles as well, because that means the Chicago Bears, whoever makes this roster, is going to be loaded in on the depth as well at each position. And that's what they were striving to do, right? That's what they were striving to do for this football team, is not only have really, really good starters, right, but also really good depth behind those starters. And I think Ryan Poles and Matt Eberflus did a very good job with establishing that depth for this Chicago Bears football team. And, as the cut down comes, right, now it's time to pick the best 53 players for this Chicago Bears football team. And Ryan Poles and Matt Eberflus and this Chicago Bears organization are going to have a really difficult time picking 53 guys. Obviously, you have your main guys that are automatically going to be on the team, but then there's going to be a big bubble of guys that are right on the brink of either making this roster or getting cut. So, like I mentioned, all the guys from the starters to the depth guys played their hearts out in all 3 preseason games. And the reason why we were 3-0 in the preseason was much because our backups were better than the other team's backups. Our backups showed out in all these games, and there was a lot of guys, especially younger guys, that showed out for the Chicago Bears in these 3 preseason games. So the Chicago Bears have some tough decisions to make. Obviously, they have until tomorrow, 3 p.m., I believe, Central Time, to cut down the roster from 80 to 53, which is always tough for any team across the NFL. So today on the podcast, I'm coming on here to predict the Chicago Bears 53-man roster. And then obviously, when the 53-man roster is set, I'll come back on here and see how well I did with my predictions compared to the guys that actually made the team. So as I go through my predictions of the Chicago Bears 53-man roster, like always, you can comment down below and give me your predictions on who you think will make this year's Chicago Bears football team. Okay, starting out with the quarterback position. Obviously, this is a no-brainer. We're going to keep 2 quarterbacks, and that's going to be Justin Fields, the unquestioned starter going into this year, and then obviously Trevor Siemian, which I feel like is a very capable backup in the NFL. But let me give some kudos to Luke Getsy, right? And how prepared they had Justin Fields, even in these preseason games. And I'm just going to look at the Cleveland Brown game, right? And you can say all you want, right, about Myles Garrett or Jadeveon Clowney not being in the game, which, okay, yes, they are difference makers. But it still doesn't take away from the fact how well and how comfortable Justin Fields looked in that offense on Saturday against the Cleveland Browns. Went 14 for 16, 156 yards, and 3 touchdowns. Obviously, it was a beautiful sight to see. Obviously, just like Justin Fields said, it was a step in the right direction. This is something that they can build on going into week 1 against San Francisco 49ers, and that is the performance that we are waiting to see. Yes, he was playing against a lot of the second stringers for the Cleveland Browns defense, but that does not matter. He was still tearing that defense apart, and that's what you want to see from your QB1, right? You want to see your quarterback 1 tear up the second string defense, right? If he was struggling against the second string defense, then the national media would be talking mess about Justin Fields. So it was a beautiful sight to see, and that was the game that we need to see going into week 1. I think that gave a lot of Bears fans confidence, and it gave a lot of the guys that started for the Chicago Bears on offense against the Cleveland Browns on Saturday a lot of confidence and something to build on going into week 1 against the San Francisco 49ers. So yes, I think the Chicago Bears obviously will keep 2 quarterbacks in Justin Fields and Trevor Siemian. Moving on to the running backs, I think they're going to keep 4 running backs. I think it's going to be obviously David Montgomery, Khalil Herbert, Tristan Ebner, which obviously showed out in the couple preseason games that he's played. He looks really good. I really like Tristan Ebner. And of course, Darian Evans. And I think when you look at guys like Evans, those are guys that you can consider like, okay, they may get limited roles on actual offense, but these are going to be special teams guys as well. You also have to consider that. So I think the Chicago Bears will keep 4 running backs on this year's roster. And then, of course, you can also add fullbacks. I kind of put running backs and fullbacks together on the list that I'm showing you. And obviously, Kari Blasingame will make the roster as a fullback, which is nice to have a fullback, right? He can help in blocking. Maybe he's going to be valuable on special teams as well, but mostly blocking. I think Kari Blasingame will be a big part of the Chicago Bears offense. So moving on to wide receivers, which is the one area of the football team that I feel that most Bears fans and the national media are concerned about, which after watching these preseason games, especially that last game against the Cleveland Browns, you can tell that Justin Fields has a lot of chemistry with a lot of different receivers and tight ends, which is a beautiful sight to see. It's not only going to be Darnell Mooney or Byron Pringle or Velus Jones that he has a connection with, right? He has a connection with guys like Dante Pettis, Tajay Sharp. So that is really good to see that Justin Fields, when we get into real live action football, that he is going to be able to spread the football around. That's obviously a beautiful sight to see. So I think the Chicago Bears are going to keep 7 wide receivers. And when I say these lists of guys that I predict are going to make the football team, things can change. Obviously, Ryan Poles is still trying to figure out ways to make his football team better. Obviously, when you look around the NFL, there's going to be a lot of surprising cuts at a lot of different positions. For example, let's say Slayton. I think it's Slayton gets cut for the New York Giants. Maybe we pick him up. I know Denzel Mims has been out there. Maybe he gets cut. We add him to the roster. So things can obviously change. And there's always ways that you can make your football team better. And I definitely feel that Ryan Poles will do everything in his power to continue to build and make the Chicago Bears roster better. But as it stands right now, I think the Chicago Bears keep 7 wide receivers. And obviously you have Darnell Mooney, Byron Pringle, Velus Jones Jr., and Equanimeous St. Brown as the automatic 4 receivers that you're going to keep. But then the other 3 I think they're going to keep is Dante Pettis, Tajay Sharp, and N'Keal Harry. I think the only reason why they're going to keep N'Keal Harry is because obviously we gave up a draft pick, even though it was a 7th round draft pick. I think they're still going to allow him to come back from his injury and see what he's made of. If he doesn't pan out, then I think they can get rid of him. But then when you look at guys like Dante Pettis, Tajae Sharp, they both had really good preseasons and definitely showed that connection with Justin Fields. And then obviously when you look at a guy like Dante Pettis, he can obviously provide some special teams reps, right? Maybe as a returner. I know that Dante Pettis was a returner back at Washington. So obviously I think that also helps Dante Pettis in this case. But when you look at the receiving group, I'm not too worried because like I just mentioned, Justin Fields has created that connection with all of these guys, maybe outside of N'Keal Harry, because obviously he wasn't around for very long until he got hurt. But when you look at the other 6 guys that I think they're going to keep, I think Justin Fields has that connection. And going forward, I think that's going to be very beneficial as they start this NFL season. Moving on to the tight ends, I think the Chicago Bears will keep 3 tight ends, and I'm really excited about the tight end room. I think when you look at Cole Kmet, I truly feel that Cole Kmet's going to take that step forward. I really do. I think between him and Justin Fields have definitely showed that connection in these preseason games, especially that final preseason game where he found Cole Kmet wide open in the end zone. I think Cole Kmet is going to have a big year, and that's definitely good for Justin Fields. So the 3 tight ends that I think the Chicago Bears are going to keep is obviously Cole Kmet, Ryan Griffin. Obviously Ryan Griffin played really well in that final preseason game, had a touchdown catch from Justin Fields. And then James O'Shaughnessy, which James O'Shaughnessy may come in more as a blocking tight end. But I think the tight end room is looking really good, and I obviously think that Cole Kmet will definitely take that jump. And moving on to the Chicago Bears offensive line. And obviously, this is one of the big question marks. This is what all offseason long Bears fans are saying, hey, we need more offensive linemen. And I think that Ryan Poles did the best he could. And when I watch these preseason games, especially the final preseason game against the Cleveland Browns, on the very first drive, and I'm just going to be very honest, on the very first drive, the Bears offensive line looked terrible. They didn't look good at all, especially on the right side when you're looking at Tevin Jenkins and Larry Borom. The pressure was coming from that right side. They didn't look good. But on the other 4 drives that the starting offense played, they looked very solid. And I truly feel that the offensive line may be slightly improved from last year. Not a lot. Obviously, you're still thinking about, hey, we're still missing Lucas Patrick, right? He's going to come back at center. You have to consider that Sam Mustipher was starting at center. Sam Mustipher is not our starting center. It's going to be Lucas Patrick. So when you add Lucas Patrick back in the mix, our offensive line may be pretty decent. I definitely think they're more improved than last year. I'm not sure how you guys feel about that. That is just my personal opinion. But I think the guys that we are going to keep are going to make our offensive line competitive. And as long as they're giving Justin Fields enough time to throw, we will be okay. So I think the Chicago Bears are going to keep 9 offensive linemen. Of course, you have Larry Borom, Tevin Jenkins, Cody Whitehair, Braxton Jones. He's going to start at left tackle, which he's looked very good to me. Lucas Patrick at center. Of course, you have Sam Mustipher as a backup at center. Riley Reif, Michael Schofield, and Zachary Thomas. Not too bad. To me, that's not too bad. Obviously, I'm not sure if Tevin Jenkins and Larry Borom have solidified their spots at that right guard, at right tackle spot, or they're going to give Riley Reif and Michael Schofield the chance. Something tells me that Ryan Poles brought Riley Reif and Michael Schofield in to push Larry Borom and Tevin Jenkins, which I think it worked because, like I said, besides that very first drive in Cleveland where Tevin Jenkins and Larry Borom looked kind of awful, they came back out on those other 4 drives and we're just tearing it up. We're holding the fort down. And I'm truly, really confident in this offensive line. Obviously, I still want to see them against like a defense against the San Francisco 49ers, right? Or got the block Bosa, right? Armstead, those big guys on that 49ers defensive line. But I do think that they are more improved than last season. And that is just my personal opinion. So I'm excited to see what happens with this offensive line if he's going to continue to add. I know I've been hearing some rumors that Ryan Poles is still not satisfied with the offensive line, which you should never be satisfied with your football team. You're always trying to get better. But as it pertains to the offensive line, this is the most important position group on the football team because at the end of the day, we need to give Justin Fields time. But at the moment, I would be comfortable with these 9 guys in the offensive line room. So moving on to the defensive side of the football, moving on to the defensive line, I think they're going to keep 9 guys, which I feel like this defensive line is a little bit sneaky. I know we lost some key guys, Akeem Hicks, Khalil Mack. I know those are big names, but this defensive line got younger, and I feel like they're a little bit more energetic. They have a high motor to them, which is really exciting. You can definitely see that in these preseason games. So I feel like the Chicago Bears will keep 9 defensive linemen: Angelo Blackson, Mario Edwards Jr., Travis Gibson. Excited to see him play this season. Justin Jones looked really good in that final preseason game against Cleveland. Obviously, you have Al-Quadin Muhammad. Looks really good. Obviously, he knows that Matt Eberflus system, so excited to see him play this year. Obviously, you have Robert Quinn, Kairos Tonga, Sam Kamara, which has showed played really well in this preseason. I definitely think he deserves a roster spot. Obviously, I think he'll also be a big contributor on the special teams as well. And then, of course, Dominic Robinson definitely flashed his high motor potential, and he is just all raw, natural, athletic talent right now, and I'm excited to see as he continues to develop what he will add to the Chicago Bears defense. So like I said, there's not a lot of flashy names outside of guys like maybe Robert Quinn and maybe Travis Gibson, right? But even Travis Gibson is not a flashy name. Robert Quinn is the only flashy name the Chicago Bears have on this defensive line. But I think this defensive line is more than capable of getting the job done. Obviously, Justin Jones came out after that final Cleveland Browns preseason game and said that we have a lot of confidence on this defensive line. We know what we can do. We are buying into Coach Eberflus' system. Once again, it's the hits principle where everyone is running to the ball. They're game tackling. Everyone is rush. It's just amazing to see. If you followed along and watched every single Bears football game, you can definitely tell that this is an effort-based team. The second that the ball is caught by the receiver or the second the ball is handed off, there is like 6 Chicago Bears defenders crowding and tackling and gang tackling this one guy, and it's a beautiful sight to see. So, like I said, this is not a flashy defensive line, but I think they're more than capable of getting the job done and disrupting the quarterback at the end of the day. So I'm excited to see this defensive line play this season for the Chicago Bears defense. So moving on to the linebacker position. And this is a area where I think they may need to improve a little bit more because outside of Roquan Smith, there's some guys that I think can step up. They have the capability to step up, but I still need to see it to believe it. So obviously I think you have Roquan Smith, Nicholas Morrow, Caleb Johnson, which is going to be a special teams guy. Jack Sanborn, obviously the big storyline, the undrafted free agent out of Wisconsin, had an excellent preseason for the Chicago Bears, not only the defense side of the football, but he's going to be a key contributor on the special teams as well. So Jack Sanborn, I think, will make the team. And then obviously Matt Adams coming from the Colts. He knows that Matt Eberflus system as well. So I think that's going to help him in his cases of making the football team, and I think he'll also be a key contributor on special teams as well. So obviously when you look at the linebackers, I think it's going to be, the starting linebackers definitely going to be Roquan, Nicholas Morrow, and I think Matthew Adams and Jack Sanborn will fight it out for that final starting linebacker spot. But it's not flashy outside of Roquan Smith, but I think once again, just like I mentioned on the defensive line, it's more than capable to get the job done. And I think as the weeks progress leading up to week 1, I can definitely see Ryan Poles potentially adding to that linebacker room if he's not quite comfortable with the guys. Because at the moment, outside of Roquan Smith, those other guys are going to have to have big seasons if we want the linebackers to be solid this season. Now moving on to the defensive backs, which this is an area that really struggled last year. This was one of our weaker position groups last season for this football team, but I feel that Ryan Poles did an excellent job. He did an absolutely excellent job of building the defensive back room up. Obviously, I think they're going to keep 10 defensive backs. Jaquan Brisker, Kyler Gordon, those are going to be day one starters, which Jaquan Brisker had an excellent preseason. Obviously, he's coming back. I think he had thumb surgery, so he's going to be good to go for week 1, hopefully against the San Francisco 49ers. But Jaquan Brisker, Kyler Gordon really turned it on, especially in that Cleveland Brown game, had an excellent pass defense. I feel it was like on 3rd down. Excellent pass defense. So Kyler Gordon's going to be a day 1 starter. Of course, Eddie Jackson looking for a big year. DeAndre Houston Carson, a household name. Not only a great backup safety, but a key contributor to our special teams. I think you can consider him at this point the Chicago Bears special team ace. Of course, Jalen Johnson. Thomas Graham Jr., I feel like will still make a roster spot. Elijah Hicks, safety out of Cal. had a really good preseason, especially on the special teams. Duke Shelley, Kendall Vildor, and Tavon Young. And obviously when you look at Duke Shelley, Kendall Vildor, and Tavon Young, and guys like Elijah Hicks as well, those guys may play some reps on the defense side of the football if guys get hurt, but their main role is going to be on special teams. So I'm confident in the defensive backs. I think when you add a guy like Jaquan Brisker, a guy that can play corner, a guy that can play slot, a guy that can play in the box, a guy that can play free safety, you can put Jaquan Brisker anywhere you want on the football field, and he is going to be a game changer. That pick for Ryan Poles is a game changer. As long as he can stay healthy, he is going to make plays for this Chicago Bears defense. And once again, I know we lost Khalil Mack. I know we lost Akeem Hicks. We lost a lot of key people on this Chicago Bears defense. But I feel that with the culture that Matt Eberflus brought over and adding guys like Kyler Gordon, Jaquan Brisker, shoring up that secondary, right? And just adding guys that are going to fit into this principle that and this culture and this scheme that Matt Eberflus brought to Chicago. I feel like this defense may be sneaky good this year. I'm not saying they can be a top 10, but maybe even a top 15 defense is doable for this Chicago Bears defense. I think this is a very sneaky bunch that can possibly be very good. So I'm excited to see what the Chicago Bears defense will do this season. And obviously, when you look at special teams, you're going to have long snapper Patrick Scales, punter Trenton Gill, which looked really good in the preseason. He's a very consistent punter, which I really like. And then, of course, the golden leg of Cairo Santos. Well, you know, everyone in Chicago loves Cairo Santos. So that is my prediction for who I think will make this Chicago Bears 53-man roster. Obviously, the deadline is tomorrow at 3 p.m. Central Time. They have to cut down the roster from 80 to 53 guys. Obviously, there's a whole bunch of other guys that are on the bubble that can possibly make this team. But at the moment, I think these are the best 53 guys that the Chicago Bears can select as we look moving forward, as we prepare to face the 49ers week 1 of the NFL season. So like always, comment down below. Let me know how you think I did with my prediction of the 53-man Chicago Bears roster. And let me know who you think will make this Chicago Bears 53-man roster. I would love to hear from you guys. And I'm super excited for the season to start. And I'm super excited to finally be back. And I just want to remind you guys once again that I'm still going to do that massive giveaway of the Darnell Mooney signed jersey and the Cole Kmet signed mini helmet once Keek on the Mic gets to 5,000 subscribers. So make sure you keep hitting that subscribe button and the bell notification to catch all Bears content right here on the podcast. Make sure you follow me on all my social media platforms, and make sure you share this episode of Keek on the Mic with every single Bears fan that you know. But other than that, I'll be back for an all-new Bears podcast right here on Keek on the Mic. Thanks, guys, and bear down.
You ain't bout it, you ain't bout it, you ain't Keek on the mic. You ain't bout it, you ain't bout it, you ain't Keek on the mic. You can go and subscribe, cause I be on it right. You ain't bout it, you ain't bout it, you ain't Keek on the mic.